that I'd like to have the court consider is longevity reward.
Hold on just a second. I think I'm forgetting something. Every time we meet, we're supposed to ask if there's any public comments. Has any public comments been requested? Sorry about that.
That's all right,
Okay, so we have no public comments. So this meeting has been duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. The quorum is present. This workshop is now in session. With that, Commissioner has the treasurer to present some information to us regarding longevity reward.
So, I've talked to, I'm gonna turn my backside to everybody. I talked to a couple of the Aflac ladies and, talking about, and of course, we just got our renewal for our health insurance, we just got all those things, and putting those things in perspective. Of course, I put some data down there that, the more our folks go to the doctor, the more they do their checkups, the more they do all those kinds of things, the less people are typically likely to use their actual health insurance. One of the things that I would like for the court to consider is a longevity reward. And basically what it would do is for any employee that has been with the county for 3 years, kind of like we pay out our longevity now, at the end of that 3 years, starting on the 4th year, the county would give them a $30 or whatever you said, allotment for their longevity per month to go towards an Aflac policy. This would, in theory, reduce the amount of insurance that they use, which would reduce the amount of premiums that we have to pay annually. And in theory, it would offset each other, is my thought process. So I've included a couple of options of where they can spend the money, a couple of scenarios as to where we can get the money, and about how much it would cost the county per year.
Stephen, do you have access to this information?
No, sir,
Okay.
I don't get it.
No, Stephen, I forgot to send it to you. I'm sorry.
Well, that's normal in my life.
I know, absentee. But, so I'll tell you the amount that if we were to do $30, and also it would help with the, the time off, that kind of thing. And it would help with offset the FMLA, it would just help all the way around. It's very beneficial to our employees, both professionally and personally. But an accident policy is about $25 a month. Cancer policy is $40. The employee will be responsible for the other 10. Critical care, $21 to $63. And a hospital 1,000 policy ranges anywhere between $27 to $29. So that the employees, of course, we would only give them the amount of the policy unless they went over, and then they would be responsible for the rest. But the policy itself would really benefit our county employees. And again, it's not every county employee, it's just those that have been with the county going on the 4th year.
How many employees we have in full-time?
Full-time employees, about 115. That varies.
I mean,
She said we have like 70 to 75 employees that fall in this category that would be eligible for it. And it would cost the county $29,200.
Right. Do we have any questions?
So is this 30?
any other county doing it?
There are other counties, of course, the amount that they give is set differently depending on the size of the county. I don't remember exactly which ones, but yeah.
And your idea is to go toward one of these supplemental
Correct.
coverage, and if they don't take any supplemental coverage, they don't get anything paid. They don't get $30.
That is correct.
They don't get towards payment of a.
That is correct. And the idea, yes, that is absolutely correct. And the idea is that it would in turn eventually offset and reduce our insurance premiums in the long run.
It encourages people to get the Aflac. Not easy speaking, now, Steve.
Is this on top of the longevity that you already get that's monetary,
Yes.
it's not in lieu of?
No, correct. It's, you know, I don't know the last time everybody got a raise, but it would boost morale, it would help with that. And then at 3 years, I think most employees are like, not quite invested, maybe I will find something better. Or at 3 years, it's kind of like, 3 years is that pivotal 7-year itch kind of scenario. So I think we help retain our employees.
So that would be $30 per month per employee.
I think Buck and I can sing the praises of that.
Oh, would you like a testimonial, sister? I'm telling you.
So any other questions? Martin? Really?
It's worth it.
Careful with that.
Well, I come prepared. Okay.
All right. Right, what's
Okay,
your pleasure now?
On the courthouse remediation, the judge has decided to stand back a little bit from it. We need to find somebody that'll be able to lead on this deal. I have somebody in mind because he's been on top of it pretty good on the numbers and stuff. If anybody else got any ideas or?
I think it's
I don't know
helpful
who
to,
you're talking about, but I think it's a good idea.
I think it's helpful just to have a little understanding on the background. The court actually appointed what was called a courthouse remediation steering committee back in April of 19. And it functioned, met some 10 times, approximately 80 hours worth of committee work. 40 hours worth of committee work by each person. And we were following it, and the court actually took action 5 times. And the Commissioners Court approved the development of it, the members of it, and then it approved the executing of the contract with Beach, and then the remediation and rehabilitation. The word rehabilitation actually came in from Sharon Fleming as additional scope originally. Remediation and then the additional scope of work, which wound up having the rehabilitation. The committee met back in June 13th, I believe it was, July 13th. And 4 of the 5 of us were there, and we deliberated with the architect. And the architect communicated some good information to us, and there was some heartburn with him that we asked him to step out. And we addressed among ourselves, and then we asked him to step back in, and we addressed directly with him. And ultimately, and Bob is here representing that particular presence on the committee as myself, and that Eleanor had indicated she would be glad to be here. But the purpose of the committee was to give guidance and direction to the court regarding this significant type of activity that has been ongoing for a while. Because we did not acknowledge or take any kind of consideration from the recommendation but deviated with it, then I just feel like that we need to either disband the committee if we're not going to utilize their work, or at least understand why it was that they came to the decision. And so I totally respect whatever the court wants to do, and it's spoken. So that was the reason for my finishing up on this. I just feel like that, if we're not going to utilize the guidance that we've used, that we've leaned upon for all of this period of time, then let's just, disband. And so Kay has been working significantly. She's put in several hundred hours on this, and as I mentioned, before, we will get those documents together, hopefully by the 15th, maybe a little bit past that, but the funding that pays for her part-time positions, if we calculate it close, it's gonna run out by the end of this month anyway. So anyhow, that support in that particular area will need to be transferred to another as well. And so I just felt like that you needed to see the picture of what's happened that's brought us ultimately to this point, the transition. And I'm, as I say, I'm totally supportive of whatever the decision of the court wants to be. And so with that said, if any questions that you would have of Bob, he's certainly here, and be glad to promptly field anything. But since we're in workshop, we're not making any formal decision, we're just discussing it. I just wanted to give the court the benefit of this information.
Okay, I did have one question on the bids for remediation, or, you know, if we got bids on both things that we were talking about, stuff we had to do and stuff we wanted to do. I mean, they're going, from what I understand, give us a better bid, but then that's going to obligate us to doing those other things to them if we take those bids. I mean, that's the best I can understand.
Okay. Now, that's a different understanding than what I took away from, and I'll defer to, in case there she's been taking, down the information and it's got the timeline on it. But Bob, was that your?
Well, what Johnny Beach told us, basically was that it would be to our benefit to get both of those bids. And then it would be up to Commissioner's Court to accept any bid. So we could accept rehab, or we could accept rehabilitation, or we could accept both. That's what he said.
So the bids would differ from.
We wouldn't have to accept, there would be two different sets of bids, rehab and rehabilitation. And you would not have to act on any of them. You could turn them all down, and you could act on just the rehab or just the rehabilitation, which is kind of where we're at right now.
At the time, we were uncertain as to what kind of an impact that the values might would have on this budget for the next year. So we were kind of buying a little time, honestly, Mike. And we discussed that. We discussed that, let's take a look and see what the whole, just getting the entire facility into a place of full utilization with a handicap bathroom through that door right there on this level, with a handicap in my old office space there when you come down. And then, like Martin said, investment that we make in it, we won't have to hopefully fool with it for another 20 years. Kind of like what we did with the other facilities that we got. We'd be totally good with that. As of last week, we got the confirmation from the Central Appraisal District, and our calculation as best we could figure out, and it just needs to be checked, but the impact was going to be about $400,000, we felt like, from just what we understood that David gave us for the estimates, and then the total impact to the bottom line of the budget. My concern, and we discussed this at the meeting, is that it's not going to cost us anything, well, it costs us very little to go out for bids. We could accept any of them, we could reject all of them, we could line item through there and say, here's what we're going to do there, but we would at least have a full picture. He had estimated that it would cost about $1.5 million roughly. My concern was if we dipped into that, then we might need it in order to balance our budget, to pull it over. And honestly, I was thinking $400,000 to $500,000. Then we could approach the Historical Commission and say, can we get an extension? We have been significantly impacted by COVID for this year's period of time. And play it in that. And let me pause and give you an update. I had the belief that James White told me in his conversation that Mark Wolf had contacted him. So I kept going back and thinking about that. And so I called him. He said, no, I contacted him. I contacted Mark directly. And he said, we had an extended conversation. And so he said that there was an email that was sent to Kay in half of the county. And somehow we missed it. And I mean, as soon as we're having this conversation, Kay goes back and search and she found it. They are offering us an 8-month extension from March 31st to December 31st of next year. So between now and December 31st of 2021, we've got the time frame, and based upon the action of the court, we can advise them. They will let the Attorney General's office know to draft up the amendment to the agreement that gives us that extension for that additional 8 months. And, you know, we didn't even ask for it. James and Mark had a conversation based upon a petition by a constituent of James who had come to his office and said, hey, you know, the county's going through this and we've got this expense and, you know, something needs to be discussed about that. We were actually discussing it once we got to the bid process to see how much would get us through to March 31st. We might be able to do everything that we needed, or maybe we didn't, because we didn't know. But we were just approaching it to demonstrate to the Historical Commission that we were taking the next step, because the plans and specifications all the way back to the very beginning had approved by the court and directed to the architect to approach it with both the remediation as well as the rehabilitation. So the scope of that work was authorized the whole way through. Once we sent the information to Don, he sends an email back. He says, now, you know what, I'm going to have to charge you to carve this rehabilitation portion out, and here's what's going to be my fee, and here's what is going to happen. And then it's going to be a whole adjusting game, because when he goes out for bids now, it will not include the rehabilitation activities. So we're not going to really have a knowledge of how much that's going to be. So that was what we had discussed in the committee meeting as to, would it be the most prudent thing just to continue on the path, because we weren't committing ourselves, we weren't obligating ourselves, we were just seeing what kind of numbers. He said it's a constructor's market now, in other words, for our benefit, because people are wanting jobs, and he said you might be able to get some really good bids at this time. And so after probably over 2 hours worth of just discussion, it was unanimous of the 4 of us that were there. It says, hey, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. We don't have, you know, we're not losing anything. Let's move forward with this in the same manner in which we've been doing it. So that's a little bit more of the background to that, Mike.
Well, I guess, I mean, maybe I'd jump to the conclusion that it would be misleading for somebody to bid on a project thinking that they were going to get this other work too, with the work we had to do to get a better bid on it. And if we ended up not doing that, then we would, you know, we would be deceiving them, basically.
Here's the way I was able to understand it, Mike. If you were doing some remodeling of your house and you really wanted to do a master bath, and it was going to cost you $20,000, and you told the contractor, hey, bid all this in, and then you get in there and you find out, man, I got to redo all the plumbing and electrical, it's going to eat all of the stuff up. Then you make a decision to do that, or you get to a point that says, hey, these construction costs are way greater than what we originally believed they were. We're not going to be able to do that that master bath. So our understanding was, look at the whole totality of it, and then if we need to carve out stuff or do it in phases, then we would have that luxury, because, I mean, it's our project. We'd say, hey, we're just not going to expense any more than that. And Historical Commission, how about giving us permission to do what we can afford to do, given all the impact to the county at this point? Fortunately, we are a 0.5% over in the total values than what last year's were. So we'll be able to go with what we used to call the effective rate, just raise the same amount, keep the same budget. Or I think no new taxes is the term that Senate bill says.
No new tax rate there. But the thing I have with the beach on that is, if we're going out only for remediation like we are, but then he has to go back and redo the plans for remediation only. So they were all tied together. If he's now having to take time to take the optional stuff out, then he had the optional stuff in the bid, so they were not two separate bids. They were separated, there's only one, but it included everything. Because now he's going back on the plan, the construction documents, and taking out the optional work. So they were all tied into one. There was not two separate ways that you could bid it, or two separate ways to look at it.
I
It's
guess,
all one plan and one whatever, bid sheet, because now he's having to remove the optional stuff from what he had. And all along, we've asked him to have two separate things. And we all thought he did, until they came down to where we only want this, it's all one budget. I have to go back and charge you more money to take out the optional stuff.
We do have,
What he's doing.
yeah, Stephen, we do have a document here. Kay, would you pull that and read that for us?
I would be pleased to do that. As a matter of fact. Okay, just to kind of recap, it was, to get my dates right, it was on the 27th that the court voted to go out to allow bids or seek bids for remediation only. And we had a specifications document in our office that was the final plans with the technology drops and everything. And there was a sheet in there that required the, I think it's called a legal notice, but it needed to go to Jackie's office. So it went, and then in that contact with Mr. LaBeach, that caused him to contact me, and this is what he wrote. He said, as you're aware, the completed construction documents include both the rehabilitation and remediation. And he's speaking about construction documents, okay, the actual physical plans which have been brought before the court more than once. That's not a surprise, okay? It says, we will proceed with issuing bids which contain only the base bid items shown in the construction documents issued to you for approval on November 21st, 2019. That was when he brought the first set of plans here. And if you look at the timeline, you can see there was a period of time before the court had the opportunity to review those. As for our billing, since we will not be bidding rehabilitation, our final bill for rehabilitation, and this was at the request of the court that the biddings be separate between rehabilitation and remediation. That's why he's speaking to his final bid for rehabilitation will be based upon the attached document from your independent cost estimating firm. The amount which the billing will be based is the total construction cost of $289,387. Previously, we were billing on a construction cost of $242,811. For remediation, we have been billing based on a construction cost of $691,080. We will continue to bill based on that amount until bids are received, at which time the billing will be adjusted to the contractor low bid. And he said that all along, that if we were overpaying based on what we thought the cost would be, that he would square up with us when we knew the actual facts. And he's not deviated from that. The document attached shows the cost estimating firms, basically 720,068. And y'all remember from the independent cost estimator, there were many places where that person said Lavicia's costs were actually light. That's the way he described it. We were concerned that he was inflating costs when actually what he was doing just the opposite. So that came to light.
Well, I think that independent cost estimator was our way of putting a check and balance on what we were hearing from one person.
Exactly, and
So,
he did that.
That was us saying, yeah, he's in line with where he's at. Now, I don't know why he ended up with that cost estimator. That was us doing our own internal check, but anyway, that's what that was for, was to make sure that he wasn't gouging us, and he was not. So, that's why we did that, to cover the people's money, and our decision making that we continue on like we were.
Yes, it says if you, again, this was sent to me, if you are in agreement, no action is necessary. If you do not agree with my assessment, please let me know so we can discuss. I'm looking forward to finally getting this project off the ground, and restoring the courthouse, which really, that's not what we're doing, but to get the work done is what he's saying. And then he sets some dates for a pre-construction meeting and a bid day, and then I responded to him, y'all have a copy of this in your packet, that, to give him notice that this workshop was being planned. And that, the purpose of it was to designate a replacement, or a contact representative in lieu of the judge. And, as I noted in my email to him, it is anticipated that a replacement for my role will be determined also. And I can speak more to that if I need to in a minute. But if I might just say, a couple of things that, like the judge mentioned from the get-go, from when Sharon and James came here, and we would walk through this courthouse and stand in the room, and they would say, that needs to be done, and it was always put back on them. Is that a requirement under the agreement, or is that additional scope? And that's been clear from the get-go. In fact, we met and challenged Donald Beach on some things that, on his original plans, he had put that they were required when they were in fact additional scope. So we've been checking him all along, and he's been making those corrections. But it's important for the court to understand, and I'm deviating just a little bit, but I need to say it, that the decision that was made last week, we will not have an accessible restroom in this building. That's off the table. The walls in the courtroom downstairs will not be addressed. There are things that will not be done. And I know y'all know that.
And
So
let me
that's all I'm gonna
clarify
say.
this. I dictated those letters to Dawn by way of okay. She literally put them down. I didn't want y'all to think that she was acting out of order.
I'm not a rogue.
I was still giving that information that's correct. I was processing the information, and then she was just facilitating the transmission of that communication back and forth. So, okay, continue, Commissioner.
Well, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what we could try to do.
Well, I would think whoever is going to accommodate the point that we're going to need an assistant.
Cutting out.
The DPS money, the DPS clerk money could be utilized to move it over to an assistant. Surely don't want to take any away from the judge's office, any worker or money from that he's utilizing now, that alone. But if the DPS clerk is not being used and they're still in the budget, could use some of that money to have an assistant, way to pay an assistant to do the work that Katie been doing. And it could even possibly be Katie, I'm using just Katie as the person, but in that position, use that money to assist whoever's appointed to that position. That's something to think about. That's a place where we could get some money that would go. I really don't think that Sue or Mary should have to burden this on top of what they're doing. On top of their regular duties. They could probably both walk out the door if you handed it to them at the same time.
Judge, what was the plan when y'all did run out of money for K?
Well, there's a two-part to this.
A lot of parts to it.
Yeah. Kay's just doing this because she's willing to, okay? And
We appreciate it.
she doesn't have to be here, doesn't have to do it, but she picked up on a project a couple of years ago that put all the books and so forth together and all the documentation. And then whenever we started, down that road, we just continued to work together because she's about to run out of allocated funds that are in the budget for this year for her position that we've been experiencing. Again, because there's so much bleed over with all of the COVID-related activities that she's been supporting the office with. So anyhow, now she's at a position to where she's just about tapped out of all of her Social Security amount that she can earn for this year. So because of that, so that puts her, and my office in any of the special activities projects, there was some consideration that I had been looking at that prior to the redirecting that we're taking on this, that I would tap into that DPS clerk position to help supplement for the remaining amount of the year, plus the other things that are already on the table. But everything, and there's some significant projects that I may have to delegate out and let somebody else handle them, but that are on the table right now that may not be able to be picked up until after the first of the year, whenever the new budget is returned. So in answer to your questions regarding that, that was a thought that we could explore.
So, are we saying that she can't work anymore this year?
She told me last week, she said she's just about tapped out as to how much she can make this year before it affects her social security adversely.
And, I mean, just on a very personal level, I had already spoken, I'm a retiree, I'm joined TRS, and now Social Security. Well, this is more than you needed to know. I also have elderly parents, and I had actually spoken to the judge some weeks ago about just re-retiring, just stepping away completely. This is all just sort of converging at this point in time. And, you know, as I told him, I'm in a place in my own life where I need to make some choices.
Well, I didn't mean to cry.
No, it's okay.
But I just don't want to know what we were, you know. You've done a great job, by the way.
It's like a little bit more about it.
So I would just say that whichever the one of you takes the lead from the court in this, you're probably going to have some support of some kind. I'm telling you, there's no way for the volume of documents, hundreds of hours may be conservative, and we were talking about that. Hey, how much time do you spend? I mean, it's amazing, you know, just the amount of research, just putting together things that support this entire activity. It just takes. So anyhow, just be aware there'll need to be some, but it's like we kind of laugh, you know, with each other. If something happened, we both drop dead, somebody else would have to pick it up anyway. So, you know, it's like, it's still gonna
Or you
go
won't
on.
realize it, right?
So anyhow, the workshop is obviously not going to take any formal action
Right.
today. It was just simply to tee up where we are, where you need to go from here, who's gonna do that, and then maybe, I don't know, if it has to be formalized. I think, am required to sign off in behalf of y'all's actions as the signatory, because the contract, I mean, it's just part of my identity with y'all is that I act as the official, letter signer stating that this is what the court did. So I still operate that.
And I think on the deal with THC, I think we had to do a appointment, you nominate or appoint you as that signature person with THC on it, but not as the court signature, but with THC stuff going on, the person that deals with THC. I think we did something like that. Donnie might recall something like that.
Whatever will
I
make
think we
it,
had to make a special vote.
whatever will make it formalized in order to give the authority to whoever it is.
We need to check with THC on that. But I think we did something like that. Like I say, Donnie might be able to look into it and see, if we had it on the agenda somewhere. But I remember doing something that, not something we normally do for document signing, but we had to do it for this thing. Well, I don't really know what you can go here. And I know you can't make any straw votes or anything like that, but, no nominations or anything, but I guess somebody can speak up and say that they were not willing to do it or unable to do it, you suppose.
Oh, that's what you were waiting on?
I'm not willing to do
Yeah, it's not. I just, it was frustrating to expense the amount of time and effort that we did in the work of the committee, and it just never did get explained. I mean, we had the action item on there.
We had, when this come up, I was, pro tem, I had no idea. This is exactly the process of where the, committee was at, or even any of it.
Once I realized that I was gonna have to be in Lufkin, that
That's not.
Stephen represents.
There's no problem with that. The fact is, I just did not realize
Yeah.
that they was, what had transpired. Because I personally I would like to have seen us go out for both bids. I would not have.
Well, and I didn't have a problem with it,
But
I just assumed that it.
But I don't think it was set up for 2 bids, so the way that Labiche.
According to what the letter that you read was.
I don't think he had it set up for 2 bids.
Or he just had it where you could strike off what you wanted to strike off.
Bob, do you recall, do you recall?
It was supposed to have been 2 different bids, from what I understand.
Supposed to be, yeah, so we could look at one and the other, is what it's supposed to be.
Well, gosh, I don't know. To me, everything was put out in spreadsheets as 2 different activities, rehabilitation and rehab. It was always my understanding.
Usually they have like an amendment A or amendment B or stuff like that. That's probably how it's set up. That's how they ordinarily do it.
I don't know.
It's not.
I thought it was gonna be 1 bid, and of course, that is what the steering committee at our last meeting proposed. That's what we proposed.
But there were always, we always had the option to strike it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And items would be base items, which would be the remediation items, and then additional items, which he refers to, what do you call it?
Yeah, there was never any doubt that you could do whatever you wanted to do. Yeah, you had the total options.
Well, I think that's where some of the confusion.
I think
You know,
so. I
it
mean, we
just wasn't
just,
clear on
Yeah.
where we were at, what we were gonna do. I mean, and that's probably not anybody's fault, because I probably got an email telling me.
Problem. It's been a
I
lot of
get
paper.
about 20 of them a day, and,
Yeah.
Well,
well, yeah.
the first time it was brought before the court was informally on June 22nd, when, during I went back and watched the video of the meeting, and Eleanor was here, she was sitting right over there, and the judge gave a report. He asked her if she wanted to. She said, no, you go ahead, and she had her notes from the steering committee meeting, and it was stated at that time that the committee had met, and that they would be recommending in a formal process to the court that it be approved for Mr. Lee to go out for the full bids. And so it was left that day on the 22nd that it would, as I wrote on here, will be brought to a future court agenda for official action. And the first chance for that to happen was on July the 23rd. And then, I'm sorry,
13.
I could read, yeah, July 13th was when the full scope of the bids was brought before the court. And again, the items would have been identified through Mr. Labiche to the contractors that these are the base items and these are the additional items. So,
Well, in hindsight, I mean, I can see the steering committee was probably frustrated that the court didn't do what y'all were suggesting, but, that didn't even really cross my mind when we had our court.
And you don't have to do, I mean, it was just that, the value of the committee
Right.
was to be able to put some maybe extended time that the court wouldn't necessarily have, and to deliberate it both from the local historical commission and its 2 members, and then the court and its 2 members, and then the one at large, because we had thought about this, early on. So, what if we get divided even among ourselves? We need to be able to, to vote. Yeah, and so that was the idea, keep it small enough to where everybody can kind of get together and have an appropriate representation from both organizations, the court side of it. And so, Anyhow, yeah, that's right.
If I might just add one thing, I don't know if the communication from Mr. Wolf that y'all have in your packet there, changes anything in the big scheme of things. But Mr. Leach is not gonna act until he hears from y'all again. And, so he's on hold right now.
And so the extension that they've offered to us, we'll need to formalize it by putting it on an agenda and acknowledging it, and then letting him know, because he's not gonna take it for an amendment to the remediation agreement by way of the Attorney General's office until he hears back from us. We're offering you additional.
Right, we have to agree to it before, we have to agree to it before he'll take it any further.
As a court,
Get it done, right?
correct.
Yes,
And I don't see why we shouldn't. I mean, that's.
yeah.
That'd be-
He's offering that we should take it.
Yeah.
That saves us $1,000 a day.
Yes, it does.
Per stone.
There's a lot of grace. It's really good.
But it seems appropriate because it's the project that it is, that it be a member of the court that becomes the replacement for my part of it. And then whoever's going to support that from location. And as I say, she's got just impeccable organizational and documentation and trails, so it'll be real easy to just pick it up and follow. There shouldn't be a headache. It's not like as if it's going to be a box of a bunch of, yeah, she said she'll put it in.
Right, and I would think we probably need on the agenda to accept your resignation, and then the next item would be to appoint, a member of the court for that, a replacement person. That way you have the formal, on both sides.
Okay. Jill is, I'm making a facial appearance to her over there, a facial expression, so she's
I see that.
she's getting a note, she's getting a note out. But that will certainly be easy to do on the next agenda, which will probably be Monday.
How,
Right, yeah.
has the fact that we've changed the scope of the bids, is there a time frame that's gonna lengthen the time frame before we can go out for bids?
Or can we, I mean, is it possible that we go back with what we were originally
I
going
would
with?
like to see us do that.
I think,
It's not gonna hurt us.
no, that's right.
We don't have to take anything. We don't. It'll give us an idea.
Well, I think we need to put that on the agenda.
I do too.
Did you hear that, Jill?
No.
Mike is suggesting to put another motion on here.
You go ahead on the original, on the remediation, and we have bids.
Then you can see exactly what it's gonna cost us to do the whole shebang.
Right.
You won't have
Is
to
that all right,
redo.
Steve? Well, we ain't taking no votes, but
Yeah,
We
we probably ought not go there. That might be.
Yeah, better not.
we'll have it on the agenda.
Yeah, somebody get with Jill and put that on the agenda at some time or another.
You're behind.
Jill's on top of it.
I know, but we really don't need to be talking about that in the workshop.
Put it on the agenda?
Why can't you put it on the?
No,
What?
going out for bids is not on the workshop agenda. Only thing on the agenda is the replacement.
Okay.
The workshop's over.
So is that a motion to?
Or is it a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
So Buck has the motion to adjourn the workshop. Is there a second?
Second.
Mike's got the second. Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, good information there, Leanne. Thank you.
Now we can do anything we want. Put it on the agenda.
Your coordinator is right here.
On the throne over here, she looks important. Oh, well, thank you, Leanne.
You're welcome.